Welcome, the world of YouTube. Thanks for joining us. This is the DLive Engineers Roundtable. We are filming live from the beautiful Smoke and Mirrors studio in El Segundo, California. Very thankful to be here today to play with some consoles. My name is Bangs. I'm the touring markets manager for Allen Heath in the United States, and I've got some of my dear friends here with me today, and we're going to play with some mixers. So first off, I'd like to introduce the man, the legend, Sean London, front of house engineer extraordinaire, and a dear friend of mine. Welcome, Sean. Jason Alt, who is the owner-president of Delicate and also a exceptional engineer. My good friend Jerry Lopez is here, monitor engineer, tour manager, and all-around great dude. And then Tyler Davis, another exceptional engineer and great friend of mine that I've had the great pleasure to do many shows with. So we've got a great group of fellas here. We do have the comments running, so please chime in if you want. And then I also need to introduce my really good friend, special guest on the phone, Drew Thornton, front of house engineer for Billie Eilish. So we're thankful to have him here. He couldn't be here in person, but we do have his brain and his voice in the room. So we're thankful for that.
Hey, God's voice,
guys.
Good to hear from you.
Cool. So
hello.
We're going to go over some things DLive today and talk about consoles in general. And I think people are very interested in what these kind of guys do in real life. So we're going to look at that stuff. First thing that we want to check out is workflow. Workflow is a really big thing. It's one of the best things about DLive, I think we can all agree, is that the workflow is super flexible and very easy to configure. But we all have our own ways of doing things, and we all have the right way that makes sense to us. And you'll see as we go along that we all do things completely differently. So just as a view inside for people that don't normally get to see these things, we're going to take a look at the way that each one of us does things on a DLive. So we're going to start with Sean, and he's going to talk about doing front of house and monitors from one desk in sort of a club situation, where you've got a lot going on, and go for it, Sean.
Cool, thanks for having me, guys. Lots of fun gear up here. So basically what I want to talk about is for the last couple of years, I've been doing a lot of one-man front of house monitors, tour managed kind of thing, because the smaller bands don't really have the budget for the crew and for the, for a whole touring party. So what I've done is this is my console here, the 2500. That's a C from DLive. It's a small surface, but it's mighty, and it does everything you want it to do. I run it in a DM48 rack. What I did just for today, I brought my session over so I can show you how everything's set up. But this is pretty much what I take on the road. It's a perfect size. It fits in the truck, and it'll go into any venue, tie into any. With my mix rack, I can go into any split if I have to, or just run directly into my mix rack for all the stage boxes.
And one of the things that we love about DLive is it doesn't matter which surface or which rack you have. You can just load it up. So he's normally on a 2500. Today he's going to be on an S5000.
So I brought my file over here to the 5000. And I'll be changing mics here. So first thing I want to show you is how I set my workspace up. Now, what I've done is everything in the first two bays is all of my instrumental for me. So all my inputs are running into the first and second bay. I go in here to the surface, and I drag and drop. So I'm in right now. My first bay, I'm in bank 1, and I'm in layer A. So that's layer A. So that starts all of my kick, my drums, my bass, everything that I need. My vocals usually will end up on the second bank here. If I need more space, I'll grab another layer and throw my vocals. So everything's there for me. Now, while I'm doing monitors as well, so now I'm going in, I'm putting all my mixes here on the far side bank number 3. So I've got control of my mixes, and usually in a small band, in a small venue, you're going to have probably 4 mixes at the most, or ears. And everything comes right off of these. I have my effects coming to the same bank on a different layer, so everything's accessible for me. all through here, and I always keep my mains left and right running through every bank, so I'm always there to be able to turn stuff down or up. I love using DCAs, so I have more control over all of my instruments, and I can just ride my vocals, and I got, everything's there for me, all my effects. So I put in effects on a DCA, all my vocal groups, my backing vocal, and also my drums, bass, guitars, just like a normal DCA setup would be. Now I'd like to show you what I like to do as far as vocal chains and effects. So let's say we go over here and we go into my selection of effects. So right now I can go in here, just real quick here, go to stereo delay, recall it. Okay, now that I got a tap delay here, and then anything else I need to put into the vocal chain or anything else I need for effects, I can dial it in. I will select my mix, send it to where it ever needs to be, and then I am set. I like to use my inserts, which is called on my, sorry about this, on my bus. I like to use a thing called Dyne 8, which basically, it kind of rounds everything out on the output. It just makes it sound a little better. It's almost like a mastering plugin, but you've got, the control that you need. It just makes it sound a lot more dynamic for me, as an engineer. And also, for my output to record is something that works well for me. The console does come with a 2-track recorder that's internal, and it'll take your mix and dump it to the 2-track. And I've actually done a, hey, Tyler, can you help me out real quick?
Just need the master up, I think.
Yeah. So Tyler's going to help me out here. Sure. Can we find that little? So this is a 2-track recording I did off of this actual session from a live recording I did a couple years back from a band called Royal Machines. So this is kind of like a. Go ahead. So this is what the 2-track sounds like when it's mixed down to from the console. It sounds really good. I mean, this is just some of my plugins, using the Dyne 8 on the bus out, straight to the 2-track. Sounds pretty good. Everything's there, guitar's there, drums are there, vocals are there, nothing's dipping, and that's just my straight mix. So anyways, that's pretty much how I do my live stuff. Really, what else am I forgetting here? But
we got a million things to talk about, so we'll just.
So I hope that was a little, that's just me again.
That's all. They just want to see the way that you lay things out, because we all do things
different
differently.
Ways that people are going to handle their workspace and stuff. But that's kind of what I do when I'm mixing both, and hopefully that gave you a little insight of what I do.
Cool. Thanks, man. So we're going to move on and check out the way that Jason approaches a console. In the meantime, though, I want to start a little discussion about something that is super important to me. It's thankfully become more in the spotlight of discussion recently. And I know when I'm out teaching classes that I make a huge deal out of it. And it's been kind of this unspoken secret that's gone on for far too long, and I'm glad it's coming out. And what I'm talking about here is latency and phase relationship. So one of the things that we did when the whole audio world moved to digital is that we have processing latency now. This is something that we didn't really have to deal with in analog. We had, time alignment as far as speaker arrangements and things like that, but within our electronics, we never had to worry about latency and phase relationships. And that's now something that is very much a part of our lives, and unfortunately, too many people ignore it. So Jason and I have had a couple of really good conversations. It's something that I'm passionate about. A lot of my mentors are passionate about, and hopefully you've heard more about it. Drew, who's on the phone with us, as I said, has had a lot of conversations about it. And this is all of us, because it affects all of us,
Yeah.
and it will infect your mix if you're not careful. So for anyone that's not watching that isn't aware, anytime that you are running audio through a piece of digital equipment, you have processing latency. It is not instantaneous. In analog audio, you're moving electrons through circuitry. It's completely instantaneous. In digital, we have to crunch those ones and zeros. And different processes have different times with them. And this becomes problematic. You have a phase relationship with all of your instruments and microphones on stage. Ideally, you will maintain that same time and spatial relationship through the entire process. That's very difficult to do these days, especially if you don't know your tools. So please, if you're out there in the audio world, understand your tools and what they're doing to your audio. So the crucial thing is that most people think that when you're within a mixer, that you can do whatever you want, use whatever plugins you want, send things wherever you want, and it's not going to do anything other than what you're intending. Is that how it works?
Yeah, let's simplify it a little there. So, most digital consoles, and as far as I'm concerned, every digital console, from beginning of the whole concept, took this into account a little. People were aware of it and didn't do what you can now do with a digital console. The flexibility of what you can do with an Allen and Heath is so much so that you can create problems, just like, because I did it, like I'll be the first guy to admit it. But the manual delay compensation on input, if you are staying inside of the Allen and Heath box, which is robust enough you can do 99% of shows on, it's the second you go out and you start inserting waves.
Yeah, so you go to an external plug-in, whether it be analog or digital, doesn't matter. Yeah, doesn't matter.
Analog
but when you leave the desk and come back.
When you leave the desk and come back.
Yeah.
And I think that there is no way currently, console manufacturer-wise, that I don't think anybody's solved how we can make complex routing, doing parallel compression, doing multiple group compression. My workflow is the vocals don't leave the left and right bus, right? My left and right bus is strictly instrument based, and my PA is coming off of a matrix, so my PA, my vocal is actually coming back in on the matrix, not touching the left and right bus.
Right.
So that makes it a little more complex, and being able to align those inputs and manually delay compensating all that stuff is now part of my workflow. It is
a chore, but as we've all learned, it is a necessary task. And the more things that you add into your signal flow, the more work you're creating for yourself down the line. It was one of the things that was a big topic in early discussion when we started out with D-Live and the whole line of the new Allen Heath consoles is, how can we simplify that situation? So we did a couple things. Number one, we made it a mixed coherent desk, allowing you to go input to group to mains, input to direct to mains, input to mains to matrix, all these different paths that you can take through the desk and maintain your overall phase relationship. Yeah. That's something that I take for granted. Most consoles don't offer you this.
No,
and
they don't.
Most people don't realize what you're doing. So if you go left with these instruments and you go right with these instruments and you take different paths through them, you're going to end up disrupting your phase relationship, which then disrupts your frequency response. Yeah. So you do have to be very careful with that. D-Live makes it quite a bit easier for you. And then the other thing is that we put a lot of processing in the desk. We're never going to have everything that everybody wants. It's just impossible, especially with as many tools and choices as there are out there from the myriad of manufacturers that are out there. But we tried to give you a really good selection of the most important things, things that we all leaned on in analog mixing and things like that. But it is up to you once you're going to go outside that you need to pay close attention to those timings.
It's funny because recently, since we've been kind of home quarantined, and I have a console in my house and waves, and I've watched everybody's webinars, I've tried everybody's trick, and there's a couple of them that make perfect sense. And a lot of guys need to realize that, when you open up a new console and whether you're walking up to it for the first time or have some experience on it, those are things you also need to check because
For sure.
and
know your tools.
knowing your tools is really good, and playing into smart and understanding how that tool can benefit you really quickly live to figure out where things are sitting and getting it up is something that you know, it's one of those other little key things that I normally, like, if I was breaking out my stuff, that would be the stuff, you know. What I liked about, you know, when you guys, you know, were gracious enough to lend me you know, the D-Live for you know, to test it out before a tour, what I really gravitated towards was exactly that. It was really phase coherent right out of the box. There wasn't a lot of stuff that I had to do to make inputs work, you know.
Sure.
And so from a speed standpoint, I was like, oh, this is really great. I go outside the box out of habit, you know, like I use Waves for very specific tools.
Sure.
There's some sounds, there's some, you know, reverbs, all that kind of stuff. I did end up being able to replicate, and this is what I was kind of impressed by, is able to replicate what I was doing inside Waves and lessening the need for that to go outside the box and really rely on the Allen and Heath. It became very easy. We had, you know, I had some specific routing challenges that I tried to accomplish, but, you know, other than that, it's...
That's because you're a freak, Jason.
I know. You know, hey, that's what I work on.
Yeah.
But I can show you.
Yeah,
I mean,
speaking of that, let's take a look at the routing. No, I kid because I love, but honestly, like I said, we all do things differently, and that's one of the things that I thrive on. A lot of you out there in YouTube world have my cell phone number. I'm very lucky that I get to speak with most of you many times a day, and I love it.
How does that work out for you?
It's cool, man. I love it. Hey, you know what? I get paid to talk about audio. If I'm complaining, then shame on me.
Yeah,
all right?
exactly.
So it's all good.
So my workflow has been the same. I template out my workflow. It doesn't matter what the console is. It's taken the same approach. It's a very analog approach to
because
the way that I mix.
you're going with the way your mind works.
Yeah.
That's
Are you saying that I'm old? Because
no, not at all.
Okay.
I mean, you are, but that's not what I was saying.
That's exactly. So I'll give you my example where the way that I'd started routing stuff, I had on the last tour I was doing, had 4 kick drum inputs. Kind of a unique scenario. Definitely had its own challenge. You know, definitely had its own challenges of phase alignment.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So in my normal routing structure, it is everything through a group.
Let me ask you this. Do you spend a lot of time, are you super concerned with the phase relationship of your kick drums to one another?
Yes.
Because some people are like super military about it.
Yes.
Personally, I delay one mic just by ear. Like I use channel delay, but I just do it.
I wish I could say that was 4 mics. I had...
4 mics completely compounds the issue, obviously. So that's a whole nother thing.
It was 2 mics, 2 triggers, right?
Yeah.
And leveling out that was like...
Well, at least you know the time of your triggers. They're at 0 times, so you...
One would hope. But, you know, that all depends on the backline guy playing with that box every day. But, you know, so is what it turned into is a phase relationship internally with those. I route those normally through a group into another group because I do a kind of, as I call them, happy and crushed, you know, parallel compression drum groups. And then those actually filter through another group in as a drum hole group that has absolutely no usually insert on it. However, I've been playing with some saturation things that I even tried inside the D-Live thing to play with that.
So for people that probably don't understand, maybe if you could just give a little clue into like how that works in your brain and like what those various steps of summing.
Yeah. So the reason I do it that way is one, it gives me, I don't do a lot of aggressive anything on the input. I'll high pass, low pass. I won't insert compression and I'll do very little EQ. Because if you think about something like a kick drum or a snare drum or a drum kit in whole, it's one big thing that you're trying to make as a sum of the parts, right? So to me, it's the kick drum coming in is its own unique thing. I don't do a lot there. I do it on the bus. So on the bus, I will have maybe 1 or 2 stages of compression.
I've never mixed this way, but it makes sense because as we said, you know, when you are summing things together, it changes your frequency response because you have that phase relationship, and you've got different mics with different times. So, I mean, scientifically, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I've just never mixed that way. So that's why we're doing this because it's interesting to see.
So you're going from like my kick group, in this case on the Allen and Heath, I did it with auxes, but I did the kick group into the happy group, which has almost minimal compression on it, that then had a parallel crush group. And so all of my toms, I have a tom group that goes to those two groups. I have a metal group, which consists of ride and overheads, not hi-hat. Hi-hat's the only thing that bypasses that a little and goes straight to the drum bus. But the culmination of those things together is where I make a whole drum kit in my mind. And the advantage of that is you're not compressing anything so heavy in one location, so that the saturation level of your drums overall has a really good place to go.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry I didn't get to hear it. So.
Me too.
Yeah. That day will come.
It will come. Yeah.
So hopefully that makes sense to everyone. It is a really unique way, and I think it's awesome.
I know, and I know that. I know I'm not the only guy who does it.
No, certainly not. Yeah. I didn't think you were.
I think Drew probably does it as well.
He doesn't. Drew, you don't subgroup this much this way, do you?
No, I haven't. I haven't ventured down that. I do see a lot of guys doing that, and I haven't seen a need. I'm trying to figure out how I would best do it based on my bus allocation and my current show and setup and some of the things that I'm trying. But I am curious so are you sending Jason, are you sending a group to another group? Or are you sending these inputs to an aux to a group?
So right now, the way I've currently done it is I'm using aux. I use the return, then I send that return, which is a fader. I know that inside the Allen Heath you can do parallel compression.
Which you do quite a bit, Drew, right?
Yeah. So I do parallel. I definitely parallel compress.
But on the channel and or bus itself, not through extra. Yeah.
So I do I treat parallel compression as an effect. Like it's not something where my drums sit with that compression on all the time.
Sure.
So I use it to intensify certain parts, and I have snapshot cues that come along with that.
Sure.
Like. So I use it, so I like it on a fader, so I have groups, I have auxes that return into channels. Those channels go to other auxes. It's really complicated routing. Like if I drew it out for you, you'd be like, how do you remember where that actually went? But that's kind of the chain, and it eventually goes to a group.
You remember because that's the way your brain works.
Yeah, I know, but as I've been accused of, I make things really, I make it really complex, but it actually works really well.
Yeah, that's all that matters.
Yeah, and this is, this made it really easy. The surface itself kind of like led me to the direction that I wanted to go with it. I did restructure it about 6 times because I was like, oh, I need one more aux. Oh, wait, I need another, but whatever.
But you have that right.
But you have that.
And you have that freedom.
So. And the thing that I liked about it is I could do all this routing while signal was running. And I could make all these changes to be like, oh, I'd be listening to stuff back and be like, now I want to do this. Here's the next step because when I start building a mix, I don't build it with everything engaged.
Yeah.
I build it kind of up.
Thank you.
So.
Yeah. I've never understood people that put all the plugins in with presets on them before they even listen to inputs.
Yeah.
Please don't do that if you're listen and understand what each of your tools are doing.
Like I spent, I spent a day moving microphones, on the last tour because it was like, like a 1/4 inch makes a big difference.
Huge difference. So. That's another thing that I preach a lot when I'm teaching classes is that I've watched young engineers just go to town on a PEQ for an hour and not get anywhere, and I'll just say, hold on a minute, I'll bypass the EQ, I'll go up and I'll nudge the snare mic over a half an inch, and they're like, oh, there it is. It's like, well, yeah. So
exactly. Anyway,
go back to...
That's a different topic.
Yes, it is, but that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
So anything else you want to mention about your workflow?
No, I think that pretty much covers it.
Okay, cool. We're going to queue up... queue up Tyler's workflow. But in the meantime, I wanted to get a discussion going with all of you about the one of the things that's near and dear to me, because it's something unique about DLive, is the different surface sizes. I mentioned it earlier briefly, but the fact that we can go from a C1500 to an S5000 to a C25 to a laptop running director to IP controllers to with the same show file without changing bus count, some of our friends out there make some pretty wild claims about being the only consoles that can share show files across all of their platforms. Sorry, guys, that's not true, because we've been doing it ever since DLive has launched, which has been 5 years now. So, and it's also worth noting that we have the only flyable, real large format mixer on the planet. Someone else, I won't call out names, but someone perhaps on the island of Japan might have launched something last week that is almost double the legal fly limit, but somehow claim to have a flyable, easily to transport console. So I don't know what airplanes you're on, but you can't check a 120-pound mixer on any of the airplanes that I'm allowed on. Maybe you have private jets. I don't know. We were joking this morning that Iron Maiden could do it because they have their own jet. But this one, our C1500, is actually a full large format mixer, can do 160 sends to 64 buses, all at 96K, and in a road case comes in under 70 pounds, and we have our new CTI titanium version that now gets you in under 50 pounds in a road case. Unfortunately, I don't have one here, but you all get the point. How you doing, Tyler? Sweet. SQ5 is under 20 pounds, so you can easily get that under 50. That's easy. SQ6 is, you can fly an SQ6 legally, but it's pushing it, and depending on the case. So, but it is a great console. Thanks for bringing it up. You ready, buddy?
Yeah, man. All
right, so we're going to look at Tyler's workflow. I know Tyler mostly from doing a lot of crazy festivals, and I respect this guy because he's the dude standing quietly and humbly in the corner that deals with the worst situations that audio can give you, where you have thankless clients that show up, they throw a million things at you, they want everything to be perfect instantly, and then they don't even say thank you, and they go away, and then you're off to do the next one. So thanks for doing that, for being the unsung hero. So he does a lot of festivals, a lot of throw and go things, and I asked Tyler to talk about why he chooses DLive to accomplish those tasks. So.
By the way, 10 years ago, when I would do weddings, I would get tipped afterwards. How often do you think I've been tipped on a festival?
0 times. No, it's yeah. Hints to all of you guesting engineers out there. Right. It's happened to me like 2, maybe 3 times in 15 years. Yeah. So exactly. Yeah.
Rock and roll. So yeah, basically this is a scene that I have for the S5000 that was for several large festivals. One of them had a rotating stage, so it really was the band's playing and we haven't done soundcheck.
Is this a go-to template for you?
This is one of them. Yeah, so. Exactly. So basically, Jason, I don't know if you mentioned, but none of your stuff hits the master bus, right? Correct. Yeah, right. So same here. I don't want any one input to go straight to my master. I want everything to kind of cascade evenly. So everything hits a group, and then those groups hit the master. And for me, what that allows is I can compress the individual channels, but then I can have like an extra cascaded layer of compression on the groups, so that if someone plugs in their acoustic guitar, my guitar group is probably going to catch a lot of that, bang before it hits my speakers. So it's a little extra layer, and it allows me to dial in a mix really quickly, because if there's 4 guitar players on stage and they're all cranking, I can just throw them into the group and even them out in the mix, and then that compression kind of takes care of itself. So basically if this will play here, bada bing. So we got some blinky lights. I don't know if you guys can hear. So this is literally just it going into my template. I have my drum group. I have 12 channels of drums. If I need to add more drums, I have miscellaneous channels that I can then assign into the drum group. And that's the way everything I have is. If I have a stage full of 4 drum kits, let's say, I can assign all those inputs into my drum group. But this is just a general festival setting. So,
can you talk about your layout?
Sure thing. So I like for throw and go festivals, my mind kind of works a little bit like a center console. And so what I have is all my inputs on my left-hand side, so I can page down to all my inputs. And then my center, my center section has my DCAs. And then if I page down, I can go to my matrices, which will have what's feeding my PA, what's feeding a record feed, everything like that. And then on my right-hand side, I have all my effects returns, and then any special things that someone gives me, like someone gives me a tape to play, like a cassette tape. I'm like, oh, okay, let's plug it in, and let's go. So a lot of the festival stuff, like my talk to stage and any local inputs, will usually be on my right-hand side. So all my inputs are there in my center section. I usually have a handle for the lead vocal or the money vocal or the money instrument. If I'm doing sound for Yanni, he's going to be my money channel. So basically everything's on DCA, and my DCAs are controlling my actual groups, not my individual channels, because I don't want to mess with the processing that I have on my channels. If I had my DCAs operating my individual channels, it would change the compression and the way that it's hitting the group. So I have I get my mix going into the group with my inputs, and then with my DCAs, I go ahead and adjust the mix as an entire whole by adjusting the groups. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
All
Yeah.
right, cool.
No, it's awesome.
And then, like I said, nothing hits the master without going through a groups. And for my needs, if I'm going to be doing a tour and we're doing 3 weeks of prep, sure, I'll get my wave server out, and I'll mess with delay compensation and all that. But for a throw and go, I use everything inside the Allen & Heath. Dude, this has everything I need for a throw and go to make something sound good, really good. Dude, this has everything. All the onboard effects, especially with the deep processing. I don't know if we're going to talk about that.
We are, yeah. That was almost a perfect segue.
This console has everything. I rarely find myself lacking, looking for something that's not there. So basically, just as a quick thing, basically I'll have my stage patch into our festival patch. So if the drummer only has 2 toms, they're only going to use 2 of the tom channels, and so there'll be holes where they're not going to be using drums or anything like that. So let's go ahead and mix. So by the way, as a quick little tip, if you're ever on one of these consoles and you are running, you're doing a mix into an aux or an effect or a monitor, an IEM, and you're not sure what mix you're on, I always just double tap any mix button, and that'll get you to your main mix.
Good one.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's it.
Yeah. So like if I'm not confident, if I move a fader, if I'm not confident where it's going to go, I double tap any mix button, and I'm like, all right, home base on my mix. Here we go. So basically, as you can see, the band shows up. Let's say I have 5 minutes to do the thing.
You got 5 minutes?
Yeah, dude, I know.
Spoiled.
Yeah, right. I have general settings. I know that you don't like to work off presets for a throw and go. What I'll do is I'll get the sound out there, and then I'll adjust from there.
If it's my preset, I think it's great.
Yeah. There you go.
My gripe is with air quotes factory presets.
Factory presets.
Yes, where they're not on your stage, not on your microphone, not on your musicians.
Sure.
Yeah, I definitely have my own presets where I know what I'm dealing with when it's my microphones. And I know where it's going to put me because I built it. Yeah, that's a valuable tool. My problem is when people put so much weight in presets built by someone else when they don't have any foundational knowledge in what that preset is set to do and what criteria was used to develop that preset. I think people just use them as blind snake oil, and that's I think it's problematic. So
are you saying that if like certain abbreviations, like maybe like a C, an L, and an A, may not work all the time? Or?
Probably. I mean,
just throwing it out.
Probably not.
Okay. All right. And basically, in any of the channels that I'm not using, I just kill in the mix, and so I'm sending through what channels we're using. So, and basically, my group processing, right there. So these are my groups. So again, I don't change my mix going to the groups because that's going to change the. I know it's not an analog console, but it's going to change the energy going through the group. So it's going to change the dynamics. It's going to change the feeling of what you're getting out of the group and how it all interacts together. So if I'm on my group page, I can see the mix elements coming through, and I can kind of visually check to make sure that, the keyboard player didn't all of a sudden crank up his keyboard to, blow everyone's head off. I can see it right there how much my group is killing that keyboard sound. Then I can address that by going over to my keyboard sound, be like, okay, here we go. Let's either gain it down, or if I'm sharing gain with the monitor console, I'll adjust the trim. Or if I'm running like a broadcast mix or something like that, I may adjust have a duplicate channel and adjust the trim on that channel. Does that make sense?
For sure.
Yeah. So basically, any drums I'm not using, I'll kill. And can they all hear the mix or no? Oh yeah. So literally, this is just the playback going through my setup. I haven't mixed this at all. Faders at 0. I just pulled it up, and there you go. So immediately, right then, you can address things
it's
like...
good enough to not get you fired for band one.
What's that?
It's good enough to not get you fired for band one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The
show's happening. So
exactly.
That's the important
band
thing.
started playing. This is the mix. So then you could start addressing things like, okay, maybe a little more presence on the kick drum. So you can go ahead and, depending on... we don't have a big PA here, but who knows, that might be interesting. So then you could go ahead and start doing that. And all of my elements are panned already. They're roughly EQ'd. They have dynamic processing on the channel and the group and my master and the matrices that are feeding my PA, my delay stacks, my record sounds. So I'm cascading processing all the way down. And that gives me extra layers of protection so that, again, someone plugs an acoustic guitar in, the people in the broadcast truck, ears aren't going to explode, my PA's not going to explode, and everything's going to sound roughly even.
Something I'd like to pull out as a key point of what you just said there is, I think a lot of people may not realize how much work you can actually do in advance before you even hear the first input. If you've been mixing for a long time, we all know I build show files on the airplane. And that's where it comes in really handy to have a really good online-offline editor. DLive is unique because what would be the offline editor for most other consoles is actually a full replacement for any of our surfaces. So it behaves exactly the same. So you can do any kind of work that you want in advance, and it's going to look and behave the exact same way as the editor does.
Yeah. So I've done shows where I have a console out front, and on the deck they have a laptop, and they're running the monitors off the laptop off of directory.
Sure.
And and that's a perfectly viable way to do it. You're hardlined in. You're not worried about Wi-Fi connectivity. It's actually a really great way to do it. So
yeah, and in a show it's great. But the point that I wanted to make that became evident to me as you were speaking is that all of these things that don't require critical listening, I can do before I even get to the gig. So when they say, band just got here now and the doors are open and they're playing in 2 minutes, that you could be in a very good position to start with. So.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And again, this will load up on any surface. So no matter what the size is, I can load this exact configuration up.
No conversion, no change in bus count or channel counts.
Exactly.
No caveats.
And anything I'm not using, I just take
cool.
it away. So cool. Yeah.
So we're going to move over and talk about monitor workflow, but I want to get everyone involved in the meantime talk about something we're using it here today, and it's something that has completely changed my life's work, and that's multi-track recording and virtual soundcheck. When I'm out teaching classes, I tell everyone that I meet that if you're not doing this, you're completely blowing it, because it's the best tool that we have. when we were all young and trying to learn how to mix, we had to find someone dumb enough to stand in front of us with an instrument to be able to mix anything. Now you can get free, legal multi-track recordings from all over the interweb, and you can basically practice mixing. And even you can even do it on free software. I mean, ideally, you would have cool toys to play with, but we don't all have that. The key is that making the mind, muscle, ear relationship between I'm hearing this, I turn this, this happens. Establishing those relationships, would you guys agree with that? I think that is what's becoming a good mixer is most crucial. That when you can draw that connection from what your ear is hearing to where you want to go, and your mind and hands know the right tool, the right knob to turn to do that. And the only way to get there is through experimentation. I think. I don't think that I don't think you can learn it in a book. You certainly can't learn how to do it by listening to 4 idiots on YouTube talk. But
not that one.
Yeah.
But no, I think you can take it even one step further. I think that you have to these days. It's not even a matter of like, oh, this is how I'm going to get into this. I mean, the one thing that I've done in the downtime is try everything. Like, it gives you the opportunity to educate yourself. I think without having a good DAW as part of your, whatever your tool set is, whatever you roll up within your Pelican, that has to be almost number one or number two.
Yeah.
And there's free multi-track stuff. I found some.
Tons.
And like you said, getting to know your equipment is the best way. You could go through all your plugins, stuff that you've never used before, and try it out. It's trial and error. Listen to your compression.
And that's the other part of it is like, if you don't know the difference between, like, if you're new and there's like optical compression and then there's VCA-based compression, those are two completely different sounds. They react completely differently.
Yeah.
But most people, if you threw it up in front of them and be like, they're just adjusting compression to just adjust compression.
Yeah. Well, because if you're doing those kinds of things in a live show setting, it's very difficult to focus on those kinds of things. That's why the time away from the stage, to me, is the most critical. When I only do monitors because the out there scares me, but I do all of my work now, all of my real work, completely in the virtual world.
Yeah.
I've got sometimes 13 or more people on stage. It's very difficult to do critical listening and trying to get things just right when you've got 100 people waving their hands at you trying to get your attention.
And
so I live and die by virtual sound check now, where I just stare up there knowing that my laptop is running during sound check, and so the sound check is for them. I'm doing nothing except what they asked me to do. And then as soon as they leave, I'll put everything back the way that it was before, and then I'll start actually mixing it. Because
one cool feature of the virtual sound check is, let's say you have a vocalist that's trying to save her voice or his voice. Bring the band in, bring the band in, and you can be playing with the tracks, and the band can be playing along with her vocal coming through the monitors and coming through just like at the same levels. Opposites as well, have the scene.
That's what I'm doing now on
right.
production with like Chicano Batman. I was about to do that before this, and we were going to do that just to make sure that you know exactly what you want. Let's run the playback and then do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, part of my day flow, because we all have this, is like I listen to the previous show, parts of it where I've taken notes, back in playback, and go back and fix the small details. Because during the show, 45 minutes, hour and a half, whatever it is, I'm going to skip over that 110%. You know? So that's where virtual
you're hanging on for life. Yeah.
No, I mean, I don't feel that way anymore.
Oh, you're better than me.
But
but wait, you only have one mix to do. I forgot. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
That's not fair. That's not fair.
We actually have the most. I'm going to go with I think our end of the snake has equal amounts of pressure. You know?
I know. I kid again. I kid because I love.
Can I
please
would love to chime in.
The voice of God.
I agree. I think virtual sound check is one of the most powerful tools for all engineers, especially the new engineers, is because you have to be able to understand what your tools are, like Sean was saying. But the coolest thing about virtual sound check is there's no PA to ring out. There's no monitors to worry about. You can literally throw those knobs as hard as you want to see what it really does in those situations. You can do reckless things that you couldn't normally get away with. And I think that that's the key of understanding the awesome harmonic content and all the processing that D-Live has to offer. You know what I mean? Like gain structure wise and how you hit these certain, effects, that it makes a huge difference. And being able to do that offline is essential. And I'm still digging through and learning more about these plugins that I've been using for over 3 years now. So, virtual sound check. Everyone, you should get on it.
Thank you, Drew.
Absolutely.
Multi-trucking.
Yes, and the point is that it's almost all consoles can do it, and you can do it in the box. If you don't have a mixer, you can do it on free software. But it's one of the things that I love about this desk is that D-Live makes it so easy. I multi-track record everything that I do because it's just simple. I'm running a 2011 MacBook Pro. It's nothing special. I did put a solid-state drive in it to get some higher write speeds, but it's, other than that, it's a very inexpensive computer. I think I paid $400 off of Craigslist for it. I quit buying super fancy computers for the road because they fall on the ground and explode far too often. And with just a very approachable computer and a Cat5 cable, you can plug right into the rack of the Surface of a D-Live and do 128 channels of multi-track recording at 96K. So it makes it really easy. Especially, I really harp on this with my House of Worship friends because if you're in a church environment, you've got a very, very cool toy that's sitting there unused 95% of the time at least. Go in there and use it, and there's no better way to learn and get better. As we said, everyone pretty much agreed here. It's really the only way. Yes, you should read books. Yes, you should, take advantage of all of the wonderful resources that we have out there, but to put your hands on and do and hear is really the only way, I think, to learn. So, all right, Jerry, you want to look at some monitor workflow?
Yes, sir.
So this is my show file, so I'll talk about a couple of things that I do really quick, and then then you chime in. So I mixed on this desk for close to 2 years before I realized that my workflow was stupid. And the reason why it was stupid is because it wasn't working for me. The reason why I was doing it is because it is the workflow that I was forced into on every other console that I'd ever mixed on. So it was just what I was used to, but it never really got me where I wanted to go. So I had this awakening light bulb moment one day, and I realized, you know what, I don't have to do things on this desk the way that I've been forced to do it on every other mixer. So as we saw, we all have a different way of doing things. Me as a monitor engineer, one thing that's important to me is having a lot of channels in front of me at once. So this is my show file on my my prime layers, on my premium real estate, I call it. It's only inputs. So normally you would have a block of DCAs or a block of auxiliaries. Before I had a whole block of auxiliaries, it took me a long time to realize that it had been 40 shows and I'd never touched those faders one time. So why do I have them sitting there? I can move the metering to this part of the screen, or I can, I have other options for getting information I need from them. But if I'm not going to use the handle, then why waste a third of my work surface on it? So I just kind of had this epiphany moment, and so now all of my top layer faders are all inputs. And then I just use soft keys to bounce through my mixes. So I've got mixes going all the way down my soft keys, and I have these set up. There are a number of ways to set up these soft keys in D-Live to do this. You can have it so that it's mix only, and that would be just the same as pushing mix on a bus, and that will just put you sends on faders to that input. But the way that I have it set up is an option in soft keys called Select Mix PFL Scene, and this allows me to select the bus, PFL it, so it's going to my queue, and I also, with the D-Live Smart Queue system, I can decide if it's going to go to my queue ears or my queue wedge, or both. And then it also brings me up sends on faders at the same time. I could additionally recall a scene, which could change my workflow, or it could just change my lighting. It could do anything that you want. So there's several options in how you do that. But on this particular show, I'm using the Select Mix PFL scene. You use this one?
I use the same thing,
or you use? Have you ever used just the mix also?
When it's through and go, that's
Yeah.
what I do. But most of the stuff that I do with the bands, I pre-program. And I want to emphasize something that lately I've been doing front of house and monitors with this board, and I do different things with the soft keys as well.
Yeah, in my heart, you're a monitor engineer, but I know that you do both.
I do.
So,
I do both.
Yeah.
I do anything.
So the point is that if you take a step back from what you're used to and think about the efficiency of what you have in front of you, you may not be doing, just because you're used to it doesn't mean that it's the most efficient way. Just making this small change really sped things up for me by having a lot more in front of me. I can take this same show file and go down to a C1500 where I only have 12 faders in one bank and still be just as efficient. I've done it on this particular show. If you think about what you need, where, and how you're going to use it, and DLive makes it so easy.
Something that I have to tell too. Like, it's been 4 years I haven't used the big format, which in the past 4 years I've been using 2500s and C1500s, and every time I go either or, it's just so simple to like just go back and forth.
Yep. I think sometimes, I think when Drew switched from 15 to 5,000, I think it took him a minute to figure out what he was going to do with all these faders.
Too many, huh, Drew?
So many faders.
I know. Sometimes I'm so used to the little one, I'm like, I'll just stay with the little one.
You can just set up these 12 and then just have, what's
all
this
which
for?
You can.
Yeah.
So program, I program because I rent consoles, so mine's 1500s are on the road, so I have to program something. I just use my big one sometimes just to program a C1500, which we have a setting to do that.
Anything else you want to say about workflow for monitors?
Workflow, I mean, most of you guys already said a lot of things. My differences are that I use a lot of the soft keys to do MIDI for my recording. So instead of me bending down to start my DAW, awesome. I do everything on my soft keys. Other beautiful thing on the latest.
So just to clarify that, you can very simply set up soft keys to do transport control. So I do the same thing. I would normally have, I don't on this show because I have way too many mixes, but you could have, most commonly I would use these four just because they work out, but you could use any of them, and you can have stop, play, record, rewind, fast forward, whatever you want, controlling your multi-track computer off to the side. So that's a great thing. A lot of people are using MIDI triggers to fire snapshots for their Waves integration. I know it's something that Drew does, so that when he fires a scene within the desk, not only does it change the settings within the DLive, but it also fires a snapshot within Waves world, so that all of his plugin settings update. Yeah. So thank you for bringing that up. That's a good one.
Also, lately I'm using the audio control app. Thanks to Leon.
Custom control.
Yeah, custom control.
Yes.
Thanks to Leon from Argentina, living in Colombia. He taught me a few things on his webinars.
Unfortunately, we don't have a ton of time to go into custom control, but if you're not familiar with it, go to alan-heath.com and check out the custom control app. It's an amazing way to make completely custom GUIs, and you can have custom control interfaces for non-skilled users normally. But you can use it for anything. And you can implement those controllers on iOS, Android, Mac, or PC, so literally any device out there. So sorry to cut you off.
Also, really helpful lately, especially me doing monitors and house at the same time, or vice versa, front of house and monitors for front of house. I've been using a lot of MCA features. Unfortunately, I don't have to show you all of the stuff.
So explain to everyone what MCAs are and what they do.
MCA is pretty much DCA or BCA. Oh, there you go, engineers. MCAs are DCAs for monitors. So in order to move something, your guitar player wants more drums. Instead of moving each fader for each instrument for each mix, you just go to the MCA that you group your drums onto, and then there you go, easy money, which is really cool. And I use them a lot on my lately scenes.
So so basically, what he's saying is that with an MCA, you get DCA style control, but for sends to a particular mix. Whereas with a DCA, you would only be sending to the mains. You'd be controlling the main fader, which would control the sends to the mains and any post-fader send. Yeah, but the MCAs allow you to have the same DCA convenience and functionality, but to go to a specific mix. Yes, and the DLive MCAs follow the active mix. So if your sends on faders to mix 1, Now this is an MCA to mix 1.
Yes.
If I go to mix 2, now it's an MCA to mix 2, and so on and so forth. So
yes.
it makes monitoring a lot easier. I want to get into deep really quick before we run out of time. So can you tell me, while we're here, since you're here, your favorite deep stuff? Really quick, for anyone that's not aware, Deep is our integrated onboard plugins. The important thing about them, not only do they sound fantastic, but as we spoke about before, we call them Deep because they're embedded in the firmware, and they are time compensated, meaning that I can use a different type of optical compressor or a different type of graphic EQ that are modeled on our favorite analog units, and without having to go outside the box and without having to upset my phase relationship. So.
Well, yeah, the ones I use the most, Optotronic. I love that one.
Yes.
I use it.
We can't say what it's based on, but you can figure it out if you looked at it. So,
I'm very lazy, I guess, but I do everything on pre-production, which I program everything either on my computer on the plane, like he says, or I do everything at home. Fortunately, I own one of these ones. So
Three,
I put
actually.
everything, 6. I put everything of the same in every channel. I use the preamps on the preamp plugins. I use in every channel. I use the Optotronics. I use the Mighty. And most of my templates are always the same. Actually, they're always the same on effects. I use a plate, and I play with all of them all the time. It's not a specific one. I'm always playing with something different. I'm using a hole, a slab, a delay, and lately I'm using a lot of the doubler as well. And I know they're coming with other plugins soon, so we'll see what we have to play with. And I'm not always in one thing. I'm always moving stuff, so I'm always having fun.
Cool. So, Tyler, what's step on in. What's some of your favorite Deep stuff?
So I love the 1170. The 70. What is it? 70 something?
No, it's called the 76.
Oh, okay, the 76. I wonder why they call it. I don't know.
There we go.
Right.
Peak limiter 76.
Yeah, peak limiter.
It's a mystery
76.
to all of us. Yes,
yeah, exactly. That thing sounds killer. And the release time, the attack and release time changes with the ratio. So sometimes I'll go with
just like the real thing.
Just like some, I don't know why it would do that, but but the way that's emulated is really nice. So I've been using that like I told you, my groups, my guitar groups. The guitars just jump out. They poke out really nicely. Yeah, exactly. So, and then like you're saying, the reverb and delays, I've never.
They had so many good ones too, and they have so much room to play with a lot of things.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, exactly. So, and then something I don't know if you covered, but the parallel path.
We mentioned it briefly, but since you're there, why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, exactly. So I do a lot of group processing, just like I think Jason.
Especially since Jason wasn't aware of this.
Well, exactly. So, exactly. And so you were saying that you like having your parallel compression on a fader or something. Well, I mean, all these encoders, you could do something with them, right? So exactly. So the parallel path, you can throw it on your groups. You can throw it on your any dynamic instance. But I like putting it on my groups and having control over how much dry signal, how much wet signal. So if I want completely undynamically controlled dry, and then if I want to just crush it for a certain part of the song.
You have help too.
Oh, I have help too. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Just in case you don't know what you're doing.
Exactly. And don't worry. It only helps the sound.
Yes.
Yeah. So exactly, it just helps it sound better. So you always want that on. No, just kidding. So basically, let's say for a bridge, I want it to be completely crushed and just not really dry at all. You're welcome to do that.
So who wants to say why you would do this? What? Jason, you want?
Yeah, I mean, there's definite tonality that you're taking. So you're taking your normal inputs, whatever that group is, and by adding compression underneath it or dynamics underneath it, because there's definitely more than just compression when it comes to dynamics, you're basically like, soup to nuts kind of tightening up all of those elements that are in that crush group. So you're getting the best of I don't know what to say, the best of both worlds out of something, but and a lot of people just do it for drums, right?
Sure.
So I kind of do
That's
it.
the most common.
It's the most common.
Yeah.
I've done it in vocals, which there's a lot of weirdness why you don't ever want to do that.
Right.
You better really know what you're going for when you do it.
But what I always say is you got to learn all of the rules so that
Yeah.
you can get
So
good
that
at
you-
breaking them.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
like being a jazz musician.
And so, the other thing that I've also kind of gotten in
Not
the
on the
habit
rules.
of doing, another place that I've done that type of parallel compression, is when you're dealing with more than 2 guitars. So if you have 3 guitar players, 4 guitar players, somewhere in there, I know a lot of you guys mix bands with even more. It's one of those things of having that parallel to be able to tighten up all of those guys, because they all can't occupy the same space. They all don't occupy the same panning position. But I guarantee you there's one guy in that band who's turning up louder than everybody else. And he's the guy who you're like, oh, well, no, I'm going to do this to level you back off.
Yeah.
Rather than just being able to compress,
But I think the parallel gives you that extra tool so that instead of just having to pick a threshold and deal with it, it allows you to kind of blend the dynamic versus the and you can also, I know you said you use it as an effect, so you can really push into it and just squash it super hard and it drastically changes the tonality and the vibe.
And that's part of it too, because on this, because you can change the preamp tone, that has a lot to do with it. Where in most thoughts, when you leave the box for parallel compression, right, you go outside of the source. You have to be mindful that whatever you do to the one group, you better do the exact same thing to the other group, right? Because then you're creating a different phase relationship all the way around. Something to be really conscious of. However, if you're in the box completely, you can play with that a little bit more, and there's less phase issues that are created by it.
For sure.
I only kind of noticed that in doing it. It was like, well, I want it to be a little more gritty, and
Yeah.
What Drew has to say about this?
Yeah, Drew.
Drew.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't hear you, but I was trying to hear. I think we were talking about parallel compression and paths. I would say one of the things that I love about the situation with the parallel path is that even with the bypass, you can literally throw the bypass on the compressor and bypass the entire compressor, comparing it to the layered sound of the compression. And I mean, that's the interesting thing about that. Like a lot of the audible compression, when you're a newer engineer, comes from too fast of attack times. But then also sometimes those fast attack times creates audible effects that are fun, but also changes the way the compressor releases, which kind of gives this in your face, kind of the speakers are moving and punching you. And it can be a really cool thing to add to your signal chain. And like Jason was mentioning too, it's really cool to not have to worry about any phase relationships, and also being able to match those volumes and just quickly bypass or unbypass. So that way, if you are that guy that's playing around with an EQ forever and you don't know whether you're making it better or worse, at a flip of like bypassing the compressor, you can bypass the entire chain, kind of giving you a reference of what you're doing to the signal path. I love that. The parallel path is one of my favorite features of the D-Live. I think it's the next step for our mixing, because we are stuck in this digital platform, and I feel like it's a great thing, but also we have challenges like delay compensation and phase issues, going in and out of external processing. So it's like we have a lot of things to combat to make things sound amazing, and we're held to such a high standard. We have to do our job so fast, much faster than the guys that can take weeks to get a drum sound. These kinds of tools are fantastic, because I think it gives us a little bit of an edge where we don't have those ridiculous transformers and all of that vintage gear to just pound into. This gives us an option to add harmonic content, maybe go a little crazy with dynamics and compression, and maybe not completely kill the dynamics of our show, because we still want to have that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Luckily in the live world, we can still have dynamics.
Yeah.
I guess we all have to
Since
experiment.
they don't exist in records anymore.
We all have to experiment different things
that's
and
true.
see, find the way we
Well, and
wanna go.
there's
way we wanna go.
we've all done festivals, and what it's kind of the nature of the beast, right? So what I've really come to notice, and because, I've been doing this a little bit longer than some people, is that guys come in now, and it is so compressed, and it's so limited in dynamic range, because all they're doing is driving things harder, harder and harder and harder. So
taking the easy road.
Yeah. So yeah. And,
Yes.
And I'm sorry, but the only thing that live sound and studios have in common are like we both use microphones.
Yeah.
And after that, it's kind of all bets are off, right?
Yeah, different factors, right?
Yeah. And it's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, true.
But I think that one of the things that like all digital consoles are giving us the advantage to do, and especially what Alan and Heath has done, is it's a platform for you to start off where you don't have to be that aggressive. You don't have to dig that deep onto something and squash it to where, like you've squashed it like fruit, you know, and like you're not getting anything out. There's no more juice left in that orange, It's like, so I think that that's where we're, being able to work with it with a, offline, listen to stuff offline, practice those techniques. Because I've shown up to festivals and mixed and been I am by far one of the loudest guys you will ever hear mix. But if you tell me the threshold is 115 or 105 or 90, I will stay in that threshold, and magically my mix will not change, right? The mix that you're coming across, but if you compress it so heavy, like a lot of guys are doing, and getting nothing out of it, when you turn down to 95 dB, sorry, your mix is going to go along with it.
Yeah, getting a loud sound without actually being loud is the real art in it.
I like actually being the loud part better, but it's way more fun to turn it up.
Well, it's all perception, right? Yeah. So unless you're using a meter, which most concert fans aren't carrying around a meter.
No.
I want you as my tech.
Yeah.
Festival-wise, Jason runs the Bottle Rock Festival, and he is basically the police, the father, the mother
sound
of
cop.
everything.
I'm the sound cop,
and
yeah.
we do.
I bet you love that.
Everything is.
I do, actually. It's kind of fun.
He's over your shoulder, right? No, don't like that. Turn it down, whatever. But we also there's police that are at every single stage.
Yeah.
And they are metering, and they are telling you.
Yeah. Well, my dear friend and mentor, James Geddes, is a master of that, making things sound loud when they're not actually measurably loud. And I think he always, when engineers come in, because I've done the OC Fair where he was the sound cop, and he's like, well, if you're complaining about the 100 dB limit, it's because you don't know how to mix. So,
and real quick, that's why I use the graduated compression thing. It's because none of my compressors are doing any extreme work.
Yeah, exactly.
They're more protective measures.
And shaping.
Tonal shaping. Yeah. Which is why the parallel compression is so cool, because you can have dynamics with the character of a driven compressor. Exactly.
Yeah. And that's also the reason, like having great onboard. Once, nobody's successfully yet put everything, like you're never going to have every widget in the box.
No.
But Alan and Heath has got to be closer than everybody else, in my opinion.
Well, we have more stuff on board, more usable stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway.
More usable stuff.
Yeah.
Because I know there's some onboard stuff.
And
why did you even think of that?
So this conversation could go on at least another 2 hours with these guys, and I would love to do that. But
let's put a real
for everyone at home. The last thing that I want to do before I say thank you and goodbye to these guys is tease a couple things for our DLive users out there. We have been working furiously on our version 1.9 firmware. Really excited to bring that out to you. We are taking advantage of this downtime, we'll call it, to expand it even further than we had initially planned. But I do want to let you know that version 1.9 is coming as soon as it's worthy of your attention. And a couple of things. There will be a couple new compressor models. One of them just might be a bus compressor, I'm just saying. There will be some great things like Sennheiser wireless mic monitoring. There will be page bookmarks on soft keys, which is a really great one. And the way that they implemented it is much better than anyone I've seen do it before, because it's just so easy. So stay tuned for that. And I just want to thank everyone here today. Sean London, Jason Alt, Jerry Lopez, Tyler Davis, Drew Thornton on the phone. Thanks
Drew.
Everyone for tuning in.
Behind the scenes, Sean Lyons.
That we had come in and
Sean Lyons.
Sarah.
Harmony Sound, View,
Sarah
Audio
Elliott, our
Technique.
dear friend from View Audio Technique.
Sean Lyons.
And Sean Ellis, owner of Harmony Sound.
biggest production companies in LA that holds all
Hey.
Call Harmony Sound for your D-Live rental needs.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Or Jerry Rig Productions, either one. And thank you so much to Sean and Smoke and Mirrors for the wonderful studio and the outstanding day. Have a good day, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
You guys.
Bye.
1.9 coming up.